Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. Happy 2025. I could not be more excited to kick off this year with a very special guest, Dr. Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic. He's an internationally renowned psychologist, an author, a keynote speaker, specializes in this sort of intersection of talent, leadership, and innovation. He's the Chief Innovation Officer at Manpower, you may know, professor at UCL and Columbia. But the core of his research is around sort of this cutting edge between what's going on today with today's workplace, leadership, human potential, and technology. You might know him for, I think, his most title-provoking, if not thought-provoking book, Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders? But his most recent book, I, Human, AI, Automation, and the Quest to Reclaim What Makes Us Unique, is one that really resonated with me. So thank you very much, Tomas, for joining us, and welcome.
Thank you for having me, and Happy New Year to you as well.
Yes. So I was introduced to you through common friends and colleagues, but I first found your work through your excellent, and I'll say maybe interesting and thought-provoking, in addition to being excellent, articles for HBR. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and your work and how you came to it.
Sure. So my background is mostly personality psychology, which is, the scientific discipline that focuses on trying to understand, assess, and explain how and why people differ. And I started my career in Argentina, where I'm from, so born and bred in Buenos Aires, actually in an area that boasts the highest concentration of psychotherapists per capita in the world. So, if you want to do something, you are almost predetermined to go into psychology.
I'm going to win my next trivia game, by the way.
Oh, yeah, there you go. There you go.
Great fact.
And started kind of in the clinical space, then decided that, it'll be interesting to deal with more of the problems that impact a higher proportion of people and kind of reimagined, my background and my expertise in the field of organizational psychology, where I have spent the last 25 years. The first half as a pure academic and a full-time professor, and then the last half, more kind of driving and leading the applications of things like, what used to be psychometric tests and assessments that basically help organizations find better talent and appoint better leaders. And now, of course, the brave new world, or maybe not so new world, of artificial intelligence and how you can basically work out the same answers, but through data that exists either in organizations or in other places. And, what I do today is, mostly I'm responsible for driving innovation, as you said, at Manpower Group, which is one of the large recruitment and human capital firms. And as an aside, I still do a little bit of research, consulting, coaching, and I try to write books because I'm passionate about, sharing this knowledge. Yeah. I think everybody is really interested in understanding themselves and others.
Yeah, completely. Well, why don't we start and talk a little bit about I, Human. So this book, I think, broadly shares how technology shapes behavior and decision-making, all areas that I and this audience would be interested in. How do you see these dynamics impacting leadership in the workplace?
Yeah, so I, Human really deals with what I still think is an oddly neglected element of the AI age, namely humans. There's so much discussion on what AI can do and whether AI is smarter than us, that I think we have a tendency to overlook or ignore how AI is actually impacting us. And the book primarily exposes, the effects that artificial intelligence has already had on human behavior. The fact that, most of us still interact with AI through social media platforms and apps that are on our phones, not so much, generative AI, ChatGPT, and other kind of platforms have had an amazing level of adoption, but they're far more likely to be exposed to AI through machine learning algorithms that edit and curate our lives for us, and work is part of that. So, the book explains how artificial intelligence has exacerbated some of our least desirable features. For example, we're now more impatient, we're more tribal, more polarized, less tolerant, we are less curious to some degree, and we are more narcissistic, all as a function of algorithms that basically hijack our dark side and exacerbate, some of these problematic behaviors. Then, it postulates or it proposes a way for us to reclaim our humanity, not just in work, but also in life in general. It deals with, the need to harness some self-control, to display some empathy, to go outside our daily habits and kind of try to become a less predictable version of ourselves, which might include, not just communicating with the people who are recommended to us via LinkedIn or other social media platforms, but also, to try to connect and be open to people who actually think very different from us. And, when it comes to work, of course, the book happened to was published on the day that OpenAI launched ChatGPT, which was very good because it got a lot of
Stars
attention.
aligned. Yeah.
It's very bad because I actually had to write it without using generative AI. So, I had to launch it earlier. Now I think, leaders and organizations are still trying to figure out how they can work out what I call the augmentation part, right? Everybody agrees that AI should be augmenting human intelligence rather than automating human intelligence or humans altogether. But that's very difficult because when you have people who are perhaps saving 40 or 50% of their time by delegating mundane tasks or low value, standardized, predictable tasks to generative AI, it frees up a lot of time. But if managers and organizations can't convince people to reinvest that time on something that actually makes work more intellectually meaningful, they're going to waste it on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And then, AI is taking over all of our lives.
Yeah. Oh, so many threads there I want to pull. And we're just going to put a pin in meaningful because I think definitely want to come back to that one. But I just see this moment as one giant change management problem, right? We're definitely an inflection point. And I don't mean 2025, but this period, we've got, in addition to being a change management problem, there are all these constantly changing variables. And so how to sort out sort of what's directionally correct through it. I mean, I'm in complete agreement with you. We're not talking about a lot of the things we should be. And I think that's because there's, with change, we have all this fear and uncertainty because we don't know how to act. And so I think people revert to, this is what worked before. That's human nature. And here we are trying to figure out, that's not the way through this time. We have to have some different behaviors. So from your research, how do you think leaders can best sort of balance this use of AI and other data-driven tools with our need to be human? Yeah.
So first, I think, there needs to be more investment in leadership, but in particular in mid-level managers. Mid-level managers are sort of the forgotten middle, right? We glamorize those who are executives, senior leaders, like saviors of the world, even when they're not. And now there has been a very interesting and I think positive trend to kind of democratize everything for most employees, who we call talent. So all deserve coaching, all deserve investment. But we forgot that the forgotten middle is responsible for translating strategy into execution, driving engagement, driving well-being, driving performance. And it's very hard to be a mid-level manager. So you get promoted for being good in your previous job without much training. And now you're expected to not just hit results, but also to understand diversity, AI ethics, climate change, ESG, political activism, polarization, advocacy. And so investing in mid-level managers so that they can actually work out what the AI or the human AI age is really important. Secondly, I think it's inevitable that we're going to rely more and more on technology going forward. It isn't going to go away, and AI will continue to evolve. What leaders need to ensure is that they can rehumanize their cultures, because even if we get the productivity gains that we like, a world in which companies treat people like productivity machines, and they even want them to be engaged so that they're more productive, and they want them to have high well-being so that they deliver more, is basically taking us back 100 years, to the age of scientific management and Taylorism and assembly lines. And we don't.
I'm an industrial engineer, Tomas. So.
Right? So I think the current trend seems that, but camouflaged or disguised with positive psychology, and it's not honest. And I think the third part is really to strategically reimagine in what ways employees can add value in their organization. So that's why I think I'm quite optimistic about some of the recent trends around skills-based organizations and skills-based hiring. I think it's certainly important to move from credentials to skills, but the next step has to be to really truly understand human potential. So if you're with a firm, Karen, and you have done all of this in the past, that's fine, but I should sit down with you and take a deeper look at your potential to understand in what ways you can add value going forward, and how I must reskill and upskill you, and maybe even pre-skill you for the tasks that we're going to need in the future. And all of this adds a lot of complexity, which is why, I haven't seen many companies that have figured this out yet.
Great. Okay, well, those are 4 topics I'd like to ask more questions on, and I'll get meeting into the second one. All right, so this first thing about middle managers being overlooked, I'm sure you're familiar with Barry Oshry's work about tops, middles, and bottoms in an organization. And for those listening, this doesn't have anything to do with anything except the hierarchical roles that we find ourselves in, and the fact that the roles have conditions that arise regardless of the people that are in them. Middle managers tend to get pulled in many directions. Anyone who's been a middle manager will attest to this, probably have scars. And so the question is, how do we keep middle managers, or give middle managers the information that they need, the skills that they need in order to do their jobs productively? So could you talk more about the skills that you think middle managers need?
And, and here, kind of maybe disclaimer or confession, my background is mostly in the field of predicting things and diagnosing things. So, although I do spend time developing leaders and coaching and advising, I have a strong bias for, the best way to fix things is to prevent them in the first place.
Yes.
And coaching, training, and development are great, but if you select the right people, it's much more impactful, and you're going to spend less money to get more results. So I think skills that are essential for competent management today have mostly to do with soft skills. They are, in essence, the skills that AI is unlikely to replicate or replace. Things like empathy, emotional intelligence, kindness, the capacity to understand other people, because AI can explain everything without understanding anything. And I know some humans are very good at that as well, but we don't need more people who mansplain things. We need fewer of them. So I think managers and also leaders will add value based on their ability to connect with others on a human level. And everybody agrees with this theoretically, but if you go to any organization and you look at how they promote people into management roles, it's still largely based on expertise, on hard skills, or on them being a lookalike to previous managers. And as we know, what got you here will probably not get you there. So I think the shift has to be towards a more humane and human profile for managers. And if you do that, you still have to invest in training and in reskilling and skilling, but that gives you a much, much stronger base from which you can start.
Yeah, I agree with all of those. I would add one from my experience. I think you covered, but I would just sort of highlight, and that is this ability to deal with ambiguity comfortably, because it's certainly always been true. I think it's an issue actually middle managers deal with, but in executive levels, life is ambiguity and complexity, and we have to be able to deal with that and still have some bias for action, but there's a tension between those. And I think that is the thing so far, one of the things that AI and generative AI are not nearly as good at as humans.
And absolutely right. And I think there's something to be said about the cluster that is mostly intellectual curiosity, but it comes with that capacity to tolerate ambiguity, to be comfortable with the unknown, to have the intellectual humility to question your own beliefs and to admit to others that you don't know everything, even when people expect you to know everything, because it's comforting, right? But I think you'll be able to make leaders and those who follow you mature enough to be comfortable with the ambiguities that exist. And also, of course, to have the capacity to question things and not take things for granted. There's a sense in which artificial intelligence is there, much like previous versions of technology, be it Google search or Wikipedia. And just because you can access any answer in 2 minutes or 5 minutes, and that creates the illusion that you know, doesn't mean you actually know something, and what you're actually digesting or incorporating is true or valid. And I think intellectual humility, critical thinking, and curiosity, and tolerance for ambiguity is essential as an antidote to that.
Yeah, well said, well said. The second area I wanted to talk about from your previous comments had to do with sort of making meaning, sort of meaningful work. A therapist said to me many years ago, she said, you really only need to work about 4 hours a day. And I was like, oh my, I'm working like 12 hours a day. How am I possibly going to get everything done in 4 hours a day? Of course, that wasn't the point, right? And my hope is that we'll be able to use this new technology to give ourselves 4 hours of sort of meaningful, purposeful work a day that uses our humanness, which is not to say I don't still need to deal with this pile of papers here on the side of my desk that use other parts of my brain. But I just know in the past, whenever we have new technologies that are going to help us save time, we haven't, for the most part, put that time to meaningful use, at least not in this current culture.
Yeah. So, you probably know that various people, including Maynard Keynes, I think 100 years ago, predicted that, by the year 2000, technology would have advanced so much that the average person would only work 15 hours a week, right? Which isn't true, even if you discount the time that people are pretending to work while they're not actually working. But I think what's interesting is that we still have this legacy way of thinking or mindset about work that quantifies input in terms of hours spent. Certainly leaders and executives, they're antsy or annoyed when they hear that companies or employees want a 4-day week as opposed to a 5-day week, because there's this idea that there is a linear relationship between every minute you spend working or doing something and the value. And probably, it's completely non-linear. You might go for a 2-hour walk and maybe you have one idea in 1 second that could add more value to your team and organization than spending 10 hours grinding it and doing, well, a lot of the things that now we can fortunately outsource to artificial intelligence, because let's face it, it is very predictable and it's probably low value activity. So I think we're going to see a lot more variation or variety in business models and how you manage people. Let's face it, most organizations, certainly since McKinsey coined the notion of a war for talent and highlighted the importance of actually human capital in organizations or quantified it, most organizations want talented people to join them, because the whole point of getting somebody who's talented is that they're going to require less effort and less time to achieve the same output. Therefore, you shouldn't worry about the time they spend. And fundamentally, if you look at some of the backlash against working from anywhere and hybrid work and working from home, is because managers still think that it's about the minutes and the hours that you spend, which ironically, ends up forcing people back to the office with no clear argument or rational reason, and forces people to then pretend that they're working. And when managers walk past them, they're like, wow, look what a good boss I am. Everybody seems so focused. No, they just minimize YouTube and Netflix and are pretending to work. So there's a lot of value that goes to waste. And that's okay, because it's not about squeezing out every minute from your time. It's actually convincing you to deploy or apply the potential, the skills, the intelligence, and the expertise you have in ways that add new value to the business.
Yes, I was thinking of a conversation I had some years ago with someone, a manager, around, if they're not in the office, how will I know if they're getting their work done?
Yeah.
And my answer was, how do you know now? All you know is they're in the office, right? You have to have, I think it's quite legitimate to have ways to know when, what are the measurements of the work that's being done.
Correct. And those managers should be reminded that just because they themselves are in the office doesn't mean their employees believe they're doing any work either, right?
Yes, well said. Yeah, always turn that mirror back the other way. So I've also read in your work that you believe, and I agree strongly with you, that it is more of the senior managers who aren't our A+ talent, who are most at risk, right? So I think in general, people think, with AI, we'll have these low-level jobs that will be replaced. And certainly jobs that are rote, those will be replaced by AI, and there will need to be skilling, which we can talk about in a minute. But for these high level, I think we don't talk about that quite as much. Could you say more about your thinking on that?
Yeah, and so I think what has happened already, and I talk about this in the book as well, is that AI has really disrupted and to some degree redefined the meaning of expertise, right? And let's not forget that if you're a knowledge worker, you are operating in the abstract world of ideas, expertise, and you are really like a human version of ChatGPT. People come and ask you something and you answer, and then sometimes that's sold to clients or that's useful to your colleagues, etc. But every knowledge worker is there because of what they learned, because of the content they acquired. And that used to be very easy. You start and you do well at school, and then you do well in college. And then even if you are applying something different, the idea is that there's a linear and almost like iterative or sequential process there. Now, it's very difficult for the majority of people to know as much as generative AI or large language models know on most things. But we each and all of us still have probably at least one area in which our expertise is sufficiently refined that we can still use large language models or generative AI and to our benefit, because we spot the errors and we basically edit and curate it. So most experts are already using that, but they are editing, supervising, and humans are in the loop. AI might do most of the work, and therefore what happens is that clients or stakeholders or colleagues understand that it's riskier to just go to AI and not to a human expert that is using AI in a better way. And so, if you apply this to what happens to somebody who is starting their career as a lawyer or as a consultant or as an accountant or as an industrial organizational psychology, there is actually more pressure to be a top expert in an area than to be a generalist, or than to say, I don't need to learn anything at all because I'm smart enough and curious that I can prompt these tools well. Well, AI can now prompt itself. So, on the one hand, AI has made expertise less relevant, almost irrelevant. On the other hand, it has made high expertise or refined expertise more valuable than ever. I always like to think about, artificial intelligence as a sort of intellectual equivalent to the fast food industry. And AI, ChatGPT is like a microwave for ideas. We all use the microwave, and maybe we use it, overuse it, and abuse it. But if you want to impress some guests with a nice dinner, you better cook, and you better appreciate, farm to table, and you better value slow food. Because if you tell them, hey, guess what? I just stick this frozen meal in the microwave, and in 2 minutes, here it is. They're not going to be very impressed. And that's the danger of overusing this and of undermining our own expertise. It's not a time to get lazy. It's a time to actually go down deeper and apply deep curiosity to issues that we're passionate about.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, I'm going to come back to curiosity. I'm going to lose my train of thought here. Too many strings. So we talked earlier about sort of skilling, reskilling, upskilling people. I spoke recently with some people from SAP about their efforts, and of course they're a very large organization, and the type of organization you would expect to get in front of this and think about how are we going to deal with our large population as well as that of our clients in order to be as ready as we can be for the shifts that are occurring. How do you recommend that people go about this?
This is really the critical question, right? Because I think if you try to address the issue, what you need to do in the workplace, it's already too late. You have to go to college and higher education, and you have to go to schools, right? Imagine people are still spending a lot of money for top schools that are teaching in the same way. In some instances, they're banning generative AI. We need to reimagine our whole educational system so that AI becomes a tool that can partner with us and interact with us, and so that humans are prepared to be augmented by AI, and so that future generations are really better equipped to handle this and the next iteration of technology. Look, in a way, and I was speaking about this with a colleague yesterday, the whole Gen AI boom has actually increased university and college programs offerings around computer science and data science. It should be the other way around, There should now be more emphasis on people who study humanities, English literature, philosophy, and those are the very programs that are being shut down. But fundamentally, with education, most top universities are really not in the business of harnessing the soft skills, including curiosity, that are necessary to equip people for the future of work and to boost their employability. They're mostly there to certify that somebody is smart and hardworking, which you can do with, other means. So I think that's where the disruption needs to come. But until employers stop telling candidates that they need to have a college degree is not going to happen, right? I give you an example at Manpower Group. We have a lot of clients who are saying, I love this idea of skills-based hiring, but they're still saying if they don't have a degree, they can't be eligible for these jobs. And it doesn't, the demand needs to go away so that we can actually change things.
Yeah. Thank you. So important. I want to end our conversations. We only have a few minutes left on this topic of curiosity, which is sort of core to my being, and I think the being of really almost all successful leaders today. You have to be curious. There are very few situations where just doing the thing that you've done before it will help you be successful in any way. How do you approach curiosity in your work, in your life? What role does it have for you?
So look, first in my life and my work, if anything, I suffer from a surplus or an excess of curiosity. And I'm not saying it as kind of fake self-deprecation, which I learned, in my years in the UK, or bragging, but truly, I get carried away because, especially now, I'm in a position where I'm comfortable to just think about something and spend the next 2-3 weeks, just thinking about that. And sometimes you can find a lucrative or productive application of that, but sometimes, I would be better off if I could stick to old and tried ways. But I think what's important is that leaders are taught and encouraged for modeling it and, almost making it a contagion or contagious things in their teams. If you tell people, hey, be creative, but make sure it works, spend some time on other things, but don't get distracted, do what deliver results, and you actually create an environment that is entirely predictable, then AI will come after your job and your people won't be needed. So I think it really has to do with breaking patterns of predictability and going outside your comfort zone and venturing into the unknown. That's why I loved your point of being comfortable with ambiguity and also, not just tolerant, but having a little bit of a kick almost when you venture into the unknown. If not, life is going to be pretty boring and you're not going to be needed.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think of it as my curiosity beast. I have to keep it fed, but I have to not overfeed it because it will consume my life. So
that's a good one. Yeah, everything is good in moderation, except moderation.
Yeah, there you are. Well, Tomas, thank you so very much for joining us today. I am just thrilled to have finally met you, and thank you for all your work. And I look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you for having me.